Hey everyone, we are excited to launch the Brightminds subscription. Unlimited access to all of our CE courses, webinars, and expert speakers all in one place.
And for a limited time for the month of December, you can get 50% off. Normally $299 a year, now just $149 for your first year.
That's unlimited CE on your schedule for half price.
Head over to psychedpractice.com and click sign up, and the discount is already applied. We look forward to seeing you there. And as always, be well, stay psyched. This episode of the Psyched to Practice podcast is sponsored by PAR, where psychological assessments meet innovation.
PAR has been the gold standard in the industry for over 45 years and has empowered professionals in education, healthcare, private practice, and research with trusted tools and cutting-edge solutions.
Discover more at parinc.com. Again, that is parinc.com. Creating connections, changing lives. The following is a Psyched to Practice production.
Hi there, and welcome to our very first inaugural podcast of Beyond the Bot, AI and Mental Health. I'm Dan Florell. I'm a professor over at Eastern Kentucky University and CEO of MindSci, in addition to the vice president of Psyched to Practice. And with me today is Adam. Adam, why don't you introduce yourself?
Adam Lockwood, Associate Professor of School Psychology at Kent State University, and I have a consulting business called Lockwood Educational and
It's good to get your own plate here, Adam.
Lockwood Educational and Psychological Consulting.
So for all of you out there, one of the first lessons to learn is don't make your own business a huge mouthful to say when you're first getting there. So right. What is the focus? As you can tell, the focus of our podcast, and this is an initial episode, is to take about 30 minutes of your day every couple of weeks to chat about AI and its influence in mental health. It's just going to be the two of us, Adam and I. We've had quite a few years of experience in AI, as much as anybody can really talk about it when it first burst on the scene in 2020 with the initial release of ChatGPT, though there was, of course, things going behind the scenes for quite a bit longer than that. And both of us have spent a fair amount of time and do quite a few trainings looking at the ethics of AI use and also how it might be applied within mental health settings, specifically more school psychology related. But we're going to start off with our inaugural issue, looking at the promises and perils of AI agents, which, if you're just understanding initially what AI is, this is a whole other level. And I'm going to defer to Adam because Adam has many of his little AI bot minions working for him, and I know about them, but am slightly intimidated by these little independent autonomous things going on and skittering about and doing things that I'm not quite sure what they're doing. So, Adam, I'm going to be somewhat of a learner here, and you can kind of tout some of your expertise as far as how we might be able to use it within mental health. And of course, we also named it perils so that there will be some drawbacks, I'm sure. But I'll turn it over to you.
Sure. I think first, it's a good idea to differentiate between maybe a chatbot and an agent.
Yeah. So, I mean, like chatbots are basically ones that everybody's familiar with, right? You get your little phone out, you open up the app, and you start talking like it's a real person. And it goes ahead and responds and has all its little tendencies like making you feel like you're a brilliant person in the world. And then agents, of course, are where you're going to go ahead and set it missions, and it will accomplish those missions any way it sees fit to get the end result that you are specifying for it. And I imagine the more guardrails and specifics, probably the better return you get on those agents. But that's just off the top of my head, kind of what the difference between the two would be.
Yeah, well, first of all, I like that you said you talk to the chatbot, because at this point, I don't type. Do you type still?
I'm still a typer, I'm even a clumsy texter. You know what it is? I just, especially when I'm out and about, I'm a little conscientious about talking to my machine out there. So I haven't really embraced that yet. I need to, because that's actually the way that I usually communicate. Like when I know I have decent ideas, I talk them through, but I usually find colleagues to do that with. And I guess, if I don't find colleagues, this will be a nice little option here. But in the back of my mind playing that sometimes it gets a little too enthusiastic about my own ideas and doesn't push back enough. So I take it, though, you're definitely into the verbal descriptions. And I think the couple times we've hung out, online and to talk about things, I see how you work with that. Any advice on it? Or is it just so natural that you really don't have to think about learning yet another skill and ways of framing things? I'm thinking like prompting, right? Prompting, if the more specific and the more context driven, usually the better results you get.
Well, I don't think people need to learn how to talk. Most people know how to talk already. So just talk, ramble. The truth is, the early research that's coming out is you get better output if you talk, because it's through this kind of rambling where you say, no, maybe not. Well, let me think. It gives the AI some insight into kind of the inner workings that you have going on that you normally would self-censor by typing. And so by doing that, you actually get better output. Not only that, it's just faster. And it can reduce carpal tunnel.
Yeah. Well, I think I know why I have, now that we've been discussing it, why I have this mental block about it. It's because way back when I got into dictation software a bit, and where you go stop and, for a period, and you had to be pretty precise, because if you put in your ums and everything, it messed up what it was transcribing. And this technology doesn't do that, but I have this prior technology mental block that I think is causing some of the issues with me doing the interaction with AI, because that previous learning is telling me, like, no, you have to be precise, otherwise it's going to mess it up.
Don't worry about being precise.
Gotcha. I'm checking that off.
What I'll say about agents, how I use them, is they're essentially chatbots that have arms and legs. And so as normally, if you're using ChatGPT, for example, you might be like, well, I want to create a blog, and it would give you information, and you go back and forth, and then you take that information and you might paste it into your blog. In this case, it works autonomously. So I might have that back and forth and say, okay, now great, go to my website, update my language. It just takes the human out of the loop so much. They refer to it as the sandwich or the burger. You have human on the front end, so we'll have a back and forth with AI, figuring out what exactly we want to do. Once we have a plan, you send it out to go do it, and then at the end, you check and you act as a human in the loop. But all that cutting and pasting, going back and forth, is eliminated. All of the busy work, all of the kind of boring stuff that you don't want to do can be outsourced at this point.
Mm-hmm. So when you say that, what comes to mind with me is that you are giving access to this AI to things that require your passwords and, your different basically personal information that I think would give some people pause. I mean, is this all retained have you looked up and see, like, how is this retained within ChatGPT? Like, what safeguards are there that it doesn't just go gonzo one day and all of a sudden you have 50 appointments with a massage therapist, in California or something?
Well, you got to be careful, because the truth is, agents have gone and deleted files that were very important. So you need to make sure that you sandbox. So the first thing you do is you start out and give it access to an email account that is
searchable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'll give you an example of a use case. I get a lot of Google Scholar alerts that are just AI articles. I get 6 emails a day, and within those, about every day, it works out to about 48 different articles. I have an email account that's just a burner account. I use it for nothing but that. And I let AI have complete read access to it. It can't send anything out from there, but it can read those. I definitely wouldn't want my bank statements going there. I certainly wouldn't want patient or student information to go in there. But that's one way. And then I give it access to folders, but those folders are sandbox. So it has its own folder within documents that it can go write files, edit files, delete files, but it cannot leave that folder.
So when you talk about that folder, is that like, for me, I have Dropbox, and let's say I wanted to give you access to a folder. I could request and say, hey, give this access, but that doesn't mean you have carte blanche in my whole Dropbox, account. You just have the access to one folder. And I guess, this is where I need to do a little more research, but like to get the agents going, is there a particular agent button for our common like Google Gemini? I know you've been using Chat or Claude. I mean, is there something that's labeled agent on the side and you click on that and start setting things up? I mean, where would people get a better idea of how to even try this out? Because I wouldn't even know. I guess I could ask Chat, like, how do I use your agent? But
yeah, I guess I should say that I'm using agent as a fairly loose term. I think this is more like agentic AI. That means it has some autonomy and can work on its own, can go to achieve goals with feedback from me. There's a wide spectrum. You have like open cloud where people are running their own open weight or open source. It's just models that they're running on their own machine, or they might be using indirect access to other models. But the easiest entry point would be either Codex, which is OpenAI, so it's essentially ChatGPT, or Claude, Anthropic, Cowork.
Okay.
But I use mostly Codex because if you've ever used Claude, you know that the use limits are pretty stringent with tokens, just meaning they give you a set amount of use of the product. And when you use too much, it will say, hey, you're done for 3 hours. Actually, Codex will do that too, but it's much more generous.
And you say is this where people would need paid accounts regardless, and they still have the token limits, or is this the free accounts that you run against the token limits more typically?
And now a word from our sponsor. PAR's AI Report Writer is an AI-boosted tool that generates comprehensive reports, including interpretations and recommendations based on scores from a wide range of popular assessment tools. Spend less time on report writing and more time supporting students. Learn more at parinc.com/AI. That is parinc.com/AI. And now back to our conversation.
You should have a paid account, just full stop. You get access to better models. It's $20 a month, which is an extremely good deal. Right now, this whole industry is being subsidized by the companies.
Right.
So with a $20 account, you can get hundreds of dollars worth of compute use. With a $200 account, I've heard estimates as high as like $8,000. So they're losing a lot of money right now partially because they want to get your use. They want to get you as a customer. But pay that $20, it's worth it. I don't know if the free accounts at least have access. I doubt it. I don't know because I have paid accounts. I could Google it or I could ask AI right now, but pay for the $20 for one of them. And my guess would be ChatGPT. You have to, of course, remember that it's not HIPAA or FERPA compliant unless you have some sort of enterprise account. And you sure of that through someone at your company or organization or district. ChatGPT for teachers, you can have a FERPA.
Right. For the like Google Gemini, if you have an enterprise through that, you should be having some FERPA compliance in regards to any of the things you use within the school's account. Just because you work for a school and you set up a free account or something, that doesn't apply, right? It has to be within that email account. So just pivoting a little bit, how would someone use an agent or agentic AI within kind of mental health or within the school kind of setting, knowing that institutions may be a little reluctant to have these agentics running around doing autonomous things?
I wouldn't start by using it for healthcare or for school services. I would start by finding other repetitive time sucks in your life that you want to automate.
And so in your case, I know it was really looking up research, which resonates with me because I am a research hound. I mean, I'm always downloading articles and putting them away and, throwing them through Notebook LM, which I think, could also be used for mental health, obviously. So think about all of the areas, even though Adam and I are very techie oriented and use it a lot for AI, you can imagine doing it for, say, reading comprehension interventions and coming up with the latest ways of tracking that, or the novel ways to use curriculum-based measurement in a particular age group. Whatever setting that you're working in, one of the things that I think we have challenges with as practitioners is that continuing ed aspect, and where we're advancing our knowledge to be the most cutting edge, hopefully, in whatever area that we are providing services in, because that's going to help our students or our clients. And it doesn't need to be where you're spending a lot of money. For that $20 for one of these, big Claude, ChatGPT, you can get and be more well-informed from a scientific journal kind of standpoint than I think you could ever when being in practice before. Like, you don't have to be affiliated with a university anymore, because Google Scholar and Google Scholar Labs has access to a tremendous range of journals. It's not comprehensive, but it's a heck of a lot more than, say, 10 years ago most practitioners have. And I think if you use Agentic AI to help boil it down, you give it some structure, set up a dummy email like Adam was talking about, I think it really can get you up to speed on stuff that will have a real impact on the way that you practice. When you say, that seems like a perfect use case, because nobody's really worried about a journal article somehow getting loose. It's open source anyway. It already has it. The AI already has that information. And yet we can easily apply it to our clientele.
Yeah. And I think it's not going to be too long before we're going to have HIPAA compliant agents. So getting an understanding of how this all works will just help you to be ahead of the curve.
Kind of helping, you're learning to walk before the running starts, right? As opposed to trying to go from crawl to run right away, which can be very messy if you've ever seen a child that tries to go from crawl to run. It's just a disaster, face plants all around. We don't want that, the equivalent when we're using AI. And I think already, we've got a sense there's a wide range out there. And one of the things Adam and I are going to run into is we're going to get a little too tech wonky sometimes, because we've been living in this space for so long. And some of the shortcuts and things that he tells me and I tell him makes perfect sense to us. But as listeners, you may have a little bit more time to get up to speed. So I'll try to put the brakes on every now and then so we can explain a little further detail about what exactly we mean with some of this stuff, because we really didn't pick the easiest topic to introduce people to our podcast. I think this is probably one of the most cutting edge aspects from a general public anyway, that most general public could utilize, are these agentic AIs. I'm not talking about the programmers and all that, that's really high in the weeds, but would you agree, or would you say there's some other stuff out there that people need to be kind of aware of, even if they haven't quite used them yet?
Well, I was thinking when you said that, maybe this isn't the best topic for the first one, but I don't know. I can think of a couple of use cases one for school psychologists and one for people in private practice right off the bat.
Yeah.
So one thing that school psychologists should be doing, and they don't do as much because they don't have time, is program evaluation. AI, create a survey with me, upload the survey to Google Forms, whatever, all essentially with no work on my side. Very little. Let's say you want to be careful. You don't want to give access to your Google Forms. I can understand that, but it could still generate the document that you could upload. But at this point, go ahead.
I was going to say, with the Google platforms, would that be something that a, say, school psychologist could do within the enterprise suite? Like, does Google, because that's not one you've mentioned, does Google have some agent equivalency that we talked about with both Claude and ChatGPT that people in the school might be able to utilize for doing something like that in a survey?
It's funny, Google has kind of fallen behind in 2026. I thought ChatGPT won the race for 23, 24. I thought 2025 was Google's year. I think that the first part of 2026 was Claude, and now I think ChatGPT, if you're looking at just the big models. But yeah, there are agent platforms for Gemini, but I'm not seeing their use very often. I think it's probably more within enterprises where they're being built. I'm not aware of any sort of equivalent of Codex or Cowork for Google.
Well, I was going to say, what I've been hearing lately is, and these are broad stereotypes, but the most consumer focused AI, and by that I mean like general public, is more Gemini. Like a lot of tools are coming out for it that they're being very like, that's the primary, what they're chasing. Whereas Claude is chasing more a business environment, and Chat is starting to move a little bit more towards that business versus consumers, general consumers or the public. And you can see that, like, they had their little video creation snippet thing on ChatGPT that they decided to jettison. I also have seen it in ChatGPT decided to go ahead and lessen where you could find learn mode. It made a big deal about how you could learn tutoring, through it. And now it's still there, but I noticed they've buried it. It's not even on like the more button and then the more button. And you have to like actually ask like, what happened to it? And they're like, well, we didn't want to feature it anymore. It still has that capability. Well, what it tells me is that they're de-emphasizing the usage for, say, a student population or a more public population. They're shifting to that more programming and like this maybe agentic view compared to, say, Gemini, where you can still see like learn mode is pretty prominently displayed. Would you agree with that kind of characterization, or is it, I'm sure there's some subtleties there. Would you say it's a decent characterization that Gemini has continued a more consumer/student focus with things like learn mode, where Chat is now pivoting more to business, and Claude has always been fairly more business oriented and has not really made as much effort to be more public consumer, kind of something you would use in schools unless you get the higher use?
That's fair. Yeah. So Gemini is very much more personal use, and the other two are more enterprise. And with that, I did remember that about a month ago, Gemini came out with Spark, which is their agent, but I don't think of it as much of an agent because it's more like, help me do shopping, help me, give me my daily brief. Like,
so once again, kind of that consumer, individual wants to have something to help their life out a little bit, but this is not like a business oriented, give me a spreadsheet that's going to plan out, our sales growth for the next quarter kind of thing. And I mean, that makes sense because we know that Gemini is embedded in the schools. Google tools, the Google ecosystem has been offered in the public schools for free for well over a decade now. And as they roll out their Gemini, the idea is, and it's a good business idea, is that we want to go ahead and have all of our people learning and getting used to our AI so that they just continue using it. I mean, to me, that's the only explanation that anybody uses Facebook anymore, is because they grew up with it and that's what they're used to. Is it the superior social media network that's the best? Yeah, exactly. Laughable, but yet, millions of people still use it. A lot of people in school psychology, still use it. And so I guess that's their approach, but is it the best product for what you're trying to get at? And I think with the agentic AIs, that it's kind of the theme for our episode today. The answer would be yes. Agents for Claude and ChatGPT are going to be better, but, you have to, and I always go back to this, Adam, like, why are you using this? it's a cool tool, but is there utility to learning this at this point? And if not, maybe you just wait a while until a use becomes apparent. Hopefully, though, our little chat, we've given you a couple uses that you can try out things that might be quite helpful, especially if you're listening to this. We're recording this in the summer months, and the summer for me is always a time to have a little bit of fun in trying out new stuff when I'm not so pressed with all of the daily requirements of being in academia or being in the schools or, otherwise. So this is a good time to take advantage of that. Adam, you have any other suggestions? You said you had 2 agentic agent ideas. One was using the program evaluation and Google surveys or something like that and kind of going that route. But you also had one for maybe people in private practice.
If I had a private practice and I was interested in driving business my way, I would have, if you have a website, you get all sorts of analytics. And those analytics never get looked at because it's just, who has the time for that? I can point AI at my website. It can look at the clicks, which pages get the most, interaction, what I can do to improve the language. And these are things I used to do, but I would cut and paste. Now I can just say, go read my website. Go find me 5 other private practices in my area that have similar websites. Doing a market analysis. What can I do to put myself, out ahead? I mean, if you're at all interested in business in that sort of way, it can be a way to increase visibility, which would be really good for someone who's either got a side private practice or new to practice or just wants to increase their visibility. So I do it in 2 ways with my website. I give it access to all my analytics. Google also gives me Google Analytics that tell me where traffic's coming from. And then I also say, okay, now work as a marketing agent, go look at the other companies that might be competitors. There's not a whole lot, luckily, right now. And just give me ideas for how to improve. And, half an hour or an hour later, I'll get some feedback and I'll be like, oh, that's a good idea. Or no, that's not. Or like, dig in more here. And it's just back and forth where it's essentially like having an intern that I set loose to do research on the internet. So anything you want to find on the internet, you can have it go and do that.
Well, it sounds like even if you were going to say go into a salary negotiation with an agency or even your school district, though I know school districts aren't necessarily always into bargaining, but you could certainly go, look up the last 6 months of help wanted in the area, see if you can find any published salaries regarding these type of positions. What is the average? And that would be a really good way of using it, because I can only imagine the amount of hours that you might spend otherwise trying to ascertain. And I think that's one of the things, because in, our fields, whether it's school psychology or even the broader kind of clinical, there are not enough of us out there. And so we are kind of in the bargaining. We have a little bit of a leg up because we can provide a skill that is not in high demand, but not a lot of very low supply. And so how can you bargain effectively where you're not just, I want $1 million a year, that's obviously laughable, but you don't want to downplay either. And I think in fields with psychology, traditionally, we don't really do a good job advocating for our own salaries, perks, and things like that. I find that in my private practice, I have to keep encouraging my employees and things of like, hey, no, you're worth it. Like, this is what you need to be arguing for. Like if you're working for a district, yes, they have a salary scale, but guess what? They make exceptions when they can't find anybody and have to have them. So don't continually kind of shoot yourself in the foot, because you need to look out for yourself in addition to the students. And one of the ways is that you get properly compensated for, what is a hard job, especially when you're in season in school. So I keep thinking, as we chat longer, Adam, I keep thinking of other uses that aren't necessarily technically using personal information, which I think from what you've been telling me in our conversation here, maybe that is not a starting point or even anything you should do at this point with agentic kind of AI processes.
I would stay away from giving it access to anything that you want to make it out of that. You don't want fed into AI. So no PII, no PHI. Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree. And just a quick PII, PHI, it's either personal identifiable information or personal health information.
Protected health information.
Protected. I don't know why. It's because PII and PHI, they're basically very similar. And you're right, it's protected health information. But, we just need to be very aware. And that's any identifiable characteristics of course, any clients, students that you might be working with. So all of these, what?
Even if it's redacted.
Right. And remember, AI of all things is really good at summarizing and finding things, right? And boiling down lots of information, condensing it to a high probability. By definition, that's how the whole system works. So can you imagine any better kind of detective in trying to figure out who you've tried to blind some sort of information from? AI is going to be able to do that probably most effectively of all its functions. And so just don't use any of it. And then I would just steer clear of students, keep it broad. If you're going to use these agentic AIs, I think as we go on with our future podcasts, we will get into more use cases of AI where you can use PII, and that's within particular systems that have been set up for that purpose. But these general purpose usage, including especially agentics, I would say, keep it broad, can still be very, very helpful without, even skirting the issues of legality and ethics.
Agreed.
All right, Adam. So believe it or not, we've survived our first half hour, and hopefully so have our listeners as we kind of get into this whole back and forth. But you want to leave our listeners with anything at the end of kind of a takeaway for them to maybe try in the next couple of weeks before they come back and hear our next discussion?
I think just have fun. Be curious. That's in general in life. Having fun, being curious is a good thing. But for AI, if you can embrace the idea that this is all new and this is all going to change, and this is something that can be fun, then it's going to be a lot better than feeling like I have to stay on top of this to stay relevant. That's just not a good. It's not a good way to feel. It's not a good approach. So if you just think of this as like, wow, this is a really cool, interesting thing that I can learn about, that will increase efficiency and can help improve the services I provide, you're gonna have a lot more. You're just gonna be in a better headspace, and you're gonna learn more and save time.
Yeah, I totally agree about the curiosity aspect. That's why I've liked technology over all these years and reviewed so much. It's not just AI, it's how could this be utilized? How could this enhance what I can do? How can this enhance what other practitioners can do? I think most of us got into it, right, to do well by our clients and students, and we want to be able to spend most of our time doing that. We don't want to spend it filling out forms. We don't want to spend it doing a lot of these kind of background things that these agentics now have a promise to maybe alleviate, so that we can really focus on the core of why majority of us got into the field. So, but once again, not because you have to, because that's just where you see the promise. And some of these are going to fall flat on their face and just be utter failures. I'm still struggling with this comic strip idea that I have that just hasn't quite come to fruition. But I was curious, and I'll get it there. Maybe I'm just waiting for the technology to make it easier on me with these AIs. Like if something doesn't work, give it 2 months, return to it. You might find all of a sudden there's a button that'll do it, in a tenth of the speed it would have taken 2 months ago. The field is just changing so quickly. And so, being curious like that, I think is just a requirement. Otherwise, you're going to get buried. This is not behavior analysis where you learn it once and it won't change in 50 years kind of thing. This is something that's changing every week. I know when I do my presentation, I looked back at what I was doing a year ago. I have like 5 slides left out of 100 that I haven't had to change or update. And Adam, you probably have gone through 3 cycles of, full cycles of slide presentations that you just don't even use because they're no longer relevant.
Yeah, it's changing pretty rapidly. And I will say I met with someone at OpenAI last week who does the chat for educators. And that was my biggest ask, because he was like, what would you like to see? I said, I would like to see a FERPA compliant, a way to use Codex in a FERPA compliant environment. And he took notes. I don't know if that means.
Notes are good. Notes are not dependent on what's in here anymore,
But I'm hoping, that one of these frontier AI companies will make this happen sooner than later, because it's got to happen.
Yeah, I agree.
Imagine it not.
All right. Well, I think we're going to go ahead and wrap up then. Thanks for listening to our initial Beyond the Box AI and Mental Health. I'm Dan Florell with Adam Lockwood, and we hope that you enjoyed it enough to come back in a couple of weeks. This is part of the Psyched the Practice podcast network, and see you next time.